Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you logging in from. Welcome to today's webinar, The Crisis in Africa, Rooted in Vulnerabilities, a Survivor Perspective on the UNODC Global Report on Anti-Human Trafficking in Persons 2024. Hosted by Footprint to Freedom in partnership with the African Survivor Coalition. For us, this webinar is just more than a moment of reflection. It's our collective platform that is survivor-led, focused advocacy, action, and hopefully leading to solutions. My name is Malaika Oringo. I'm honored to be your host to this important discussion on behalf of Footprint to Freedom and the African Survivor Coalition. Before we dive into our webinar and also the logistics and also speaking about our panelists, I wanted to take this moment to extend our gratitude to UNODC and its contributors for its commitment to kind of collect this data, but at the same time also engaging survivors. As survivors on frontline, as frontline workers, but at the same time, people who have lived this trafficking experience, these statistics are just more than numbers. To us, they are people with stories, with experiences that we've had firsthand. When we look at the 2024 report, it gave the African continent almost one chapter, and also indicated that Africa has got one of the highest vulnerability rate when it comes to human trafficking. It also did shed a light on the root causes and emphasizes what is required actually to combat human trafficking, not only on a global perspective, but also as a continental responsibility. Well, it's encouraging that it was more evidence-based because there were more data-driven from Africa. What we have to acknowledge that the vast majority of human trafficking cases always go unidentified. Why? Because human trafficking always happens in informal economies, especially in Africa where there's not good indicators of victim identification. I believe that even though we are mandated by the global protocols on combating human trafficking in our shared goal, I believe that we need to look at Africa as a continent that has got its specific issues that require specific context solutions. When we see Africa at the heart of our crisis, victims are expected to self-identify, yet societal norms and stigma often silence victims. Also, poverty remains the most powerful trafficker of all times, despite the fact that most of the money is spent on legal instruments and border control. And exploitation is both condemned and at times quietly tolerated because of the issue of economic related issues. So today, we survivors, not only have we endured, but also we understand what is needed for survivors to really get full control of their lives. We are taking this moment not only to share the statistics within the global report, but to bring in our personal experience as people who are on the front line, but at the same time as stewardess to solutions. As we go ahead, I want to also give in some bit of highlights that in the next 90 minutes, we'll explore some most recommended areas, even though the report has a vast interest, but focus for today, we want to focus on 4 areas. One, the mental health needs of trafficking survivors, the vulnerability rates of migrant survivors, particularly in the Middle East, the impact of armed conflicts and political instability on trafficking, showcased from DRC Congo, and empowerment strategies for women. So I invite you all to engage in this conversation through with the chat. With the chat, you can leave your questions, but at the same time, you could ask questions. I have a few housekeeping rules. Please mute your mic if you're not speaking. Secondly, looking at the time, we want you to submit your questions in the chat. Some of the questions we are going to address them in time so that we answer them in the chat, and others we are going to answer them in the Q&A question time. Also, there is the language interpretation part. If you are a French speaker, please, there is a language icon that you have to click on. The instructions, you can find them in the chat. Without further ado, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, Iona Bur. She's a Romanian human rights activist. She has been working since 2005 to combat human trafficking. She has led prevention activities, developed materials. Also, she's the chairperson of El Barrel, leading anti-human trafficking coalitions, but at the same time, she's also spearheaded new innovations on combating human trafficking and identifying vulnerabilities among refugees with the Campus Project. Also, we are honored that she's also the chairperson of the African Survivor Coalition Technical Team Advice. Without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Iona. Please, you can find the complete bio in the chat. Iona, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Malaika, and hello, everyone. Bună ziua tuturor. I am extremely honored to be here and to open the keynote as the chair of the African Survivor Coalition Advisory Team, which is a role that both honors me, and it's also something that I take in a learning spirit. I am here and I can't wait to learn from all of you, and my interest in figuring out how to empower the members of the coalition is extremely high. So in a way, I feel like I shouldn't be doing the keynote as much as I should be taking notes from each and every one of you. Many thanks to Malaika, enjoy the whole team, for not just inviting me, but putting all this together. Thank you for your hard work and your commitment. I know that we see just certain events, but your work is something that you have been doing for a very long time in a very dedicated way. So I just want to acknowledge that and honor that. I do have a very short amount of time to talk about the general findings of the UNODC GLOW-TIP report. And Malaika has already covered several things on the African context. Therefore, I'm just gonna take a few ideas that I think is important to stay with us. I'm not going to go into statistics. I believe you have the link to the report already shared, but there are a few things that Malaika has already touched on that I think it's important for us to take into account. One, the identification piece. And while the report mentions that identification has gone up compared to 2020, by the way, we're looking at a report that was published in 2024 and analyzed data up to 2022. It's important to see that in some parts of the world, identification is still lower than what it was before the pandemic, so lower than 2019, or at an all-time low if we're looking at the Caribbean, for example. So while we do see more identifications compared to the pre-pandemic, we are still struggling to identify victims. And I think that this happens because we're still putting the burden on the victims to self-identify. we need a low threshold for identification. We need the burden of proof to not be on the victims, as well as we have issues with vitiated consent, in which human trafficking, we say, is hidden in plain sight. A lot of times we see victims, they're in our communities. We're used to having them on the streets around us, but we don't realize that they're victims because we are struggling to understand coercion or other factors that play into the trafficking piece. Also, it's important to note that we still need the social path for identification, meaning that it cannot be just law enforcement or state authorities that identify victims formally. This has to be done also in partnership with specialized civil society organizations or non-governmental organizations or specialists in the social work field or other connect fields. Malaika mentioned the protection model that we have developed and that we're actually piloting in different parts of Africa in partnership with Footprint to Freedom and the African Survivor Coalition, called Compass. I think it's important to outreach vulnerable populations and ensure that we are actually going into the spaces where trafficking happens in order to disrupt it, rather than wait for victims to come to us, self-identify, ask for help, and then also testify and put all the burden on those who have already been victimized and exploited. The second piece that I want us to focus on is the fact that we're seeing more and more minor victims, so children who are being trafficked. Overall, women and girls account for about 89% of the victims who are exploited for sexual exploitation, but children are increasing in the statistics as being identified as victims of human trafficking, with boys being caught in other forms of human trafficking and forced labor, and as mentioned, girls mostly in sexual exploitation. This is extremely alarming. We need to ensure that when we think of safeguards, we're also thinking of ways in which prevention can actually happen, and prevention cannot happen without creating opportunities. So ensuring that we look at how do we have this complex way of safeguarding children from trafficking and exploitation. It needs to start early, and it needs to include specific opportunities for them to not be exposed to the offers of traffickers who sell the dream of a better life. Also, the role of technology, tech-facilitated trafficking in person is increasing. And this is a challenge because we want technical literacy and empowerment in this space for everyone across the world. At the same time, we also need clear safeguards in order to protect from this extra layer in which a lot of times victims don't even know their traffickers, they don't even interact with their traffickers face-to-face. Everything happens in online. And lastly, because I've already exhausted my time, I think the overarching theme of this meeting, of the activities, of everything that we're doing in the anti-trafficking movement is to ensure that we have meaningful and ethical survivor engagement. And here, I'm also including support for survivor leaders. It's not just about making the space at the table. It's also about ensuring that they have access to resources, that they have access to the opportunities that they need in order to grow in whatever space they want, whether it's getting involved in the anti-trafficking movement as consultant or as speakers in the public eye, or whether it's choosing to support in other ways. They need to have the support and the freedom to do so, and also the resources to do so. Therefore, again, I just want to extend a huge thanks to Malaika and the other survivors in the room. There's several of you from whom I have learned a lot. And I think the experts by experience, they don't just need to be recognized, they also need to be resourced. So I'm looking forward to finding out more ways in which we can all do that as allies. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Iona, for bringing that comprehensive overview. One question you asked, why you taking a keynote speaker? One is because we know that traffickers network, and they work in a very collaborative approach from Africa to Europe to the West. So for us, in order to work together, push our mandates, we need to collaborate. And in collaboration, we've identified individuals and organizations who are not only looking at this as a human trafficking response, but also looking at survivor inclusion and engagement as a vital piece of their work. And we've been honored to work with El Barrio and you in person, so you'll come in as a best practice. Thank you very much. One thing that I want to just highlight on something you mentioned on protection model. One thing that I think we should also take on a serious note is that when the global or the Western regions come up with protection models on how either to protect or prevent human trafficking, sometimes their policies do more harm than good. For example, survivors are becoming victims or are becoming torn between legal frameworks. For example, the kafala sponsorship system in the Middle East that is enhanced by bilateral agreements across Africa, the strict migration policies in Europe, and externalization agreements such as the EU-Libya Pact, which pushes migrants into the hands of traffickers and operating in unsafe conditions. So in order to address this issue, not only Africa has to check its gray areas, but also we need to acknowledge that some global policies exacerbate human trafficking. Coming on the next person, next not speaker is one of my best favorite persons, Eyab Johannes. He is a PhD researcher, or he's PhD associates, and wow, how do they put this? So he's an academic and a researcher. He conducts interdisciplinary research, builds collaboration, and holds various leadership roles, one of which is a member of the African Survivor Coalition. I had an opportunity to serve with him as members of ISTAC for 2 years. It has been an honor working with you and sharing and learning with you every day. So the floor is yours. You can find his full bio in the chat.
Thank you, Malaika, and thank you, Iona, as well. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Eyab Johannes. I work as a researcher at the University of Glasgow, and I was wondering if you can start by sharing the slides, Joy, so that I can briefly talk about. Yeah, I'm going to briefly, I have only 5 minutes, so I'm going to briefly talk about what I call counted and discounted. And next slide, please, Joy. These are some of the I always get asked every time I talk to people who survived trafficking, particularly people who are from migrant background. And does the world know we exist? How do we grieve the ungrievable when suffering has no name, no place to rest? How do we bear witness to the unbearable when silence wraps itself around the wounds? How do we connect or relate beneath the skin and beyond the numbers, reports, borders, and levels? Next slide. Yeah, and their message has always been, you may see the numbers, reports, and the rhetorical discourses about us, but no one feels our humanity. Our humanity remains unseen, unrecognizable to the world. And they, for example, mentioned like all the rhetorical projectors of human rights and ask, why do people just talk about human rights and not humans? And who is the human in the human rights people talk about? Are we really human beings? These are some of the questions that I get asked. And to the world, we are not recognizable, and our suffering is unintelligible to its consciousness. Next slide. So these are what I call open wounds and scars. And this is one participant basically taking off his shirt and showing me their bodies burned by traffickers, pouring melted plastic on their back. Look at my wounds, still bleeding. These are my scars, my old wounds. And what happened to the humanity of these people? And what happens to their bodies? For many of these people, the body is the home. Is the home that maintains your skin color, a home that you can travel with, a home without geography. But what happens? That home is owned by another person or another entity or an organized group. What happens to the faces of these people when we cannot see a human face, but see numbers, figures that can be counted in reports and that can be told or talked about? This is what in academics, particularly Fanon calls the amputation of being, which basically translates to when a separation of the human from the body and the murder of the human. And what remains is the body that is rendered killable, owned by other people or entities, the body that can be discarded, the body that can be disposed of. And that is what the trafficking are doing to these people. When you lose your humanity, then you only become a figure or a number, as we can see in the reports. And that is what the questions are coming from a position of vulnerability, but also from a losing hope in the structures we have. And when I say traffickers and entities, I do not just mean individuals or organized groups. I also mean the states and their involvement in these kind of crimes. When the state deports people who are seeking refuge, who are victims of trafficking for offshore detention, that to me is a form of state trafficking that we never speak about. And there is no way that we can hold accountable the state itself as for its own inactions, or maybe actions that contribute to the trafficking or that creates the conditions for trafficking in the first place. Can you go to the next slide? So I want to end this with a short poem I wrote sitting in front of the Mediterranean Sea, thinking about some of the friends and relatives we've lost or drowned in the sea. And this is also included in a book that I have recently submitted for publication. Sitting on the shore, we gaze out at this vast sea, full of mysteries and stories untold. As we take in the view, our minds drift to the lives of friends and strangers who have perished in the abyss. We find ourselves wondering, where are our friends? With a deep breath, our thoughts dissolve into the unknown. Thank you.
Wow. All of you can, just like me, we just needed moments to breathe in this moment of truth. One thing I like about your approach, Yab, is that you're an academic, but you bring the reality close to the people. And that is what is really very important, that when lived experience takes on these important roles, not only they speak from the place of knowledge, experience, and authenticity, we really you speak to our hearts. One thing that I can also take with me today, and the continuous thematic areas that we use, that we moved from victim-centered, survivor-centered to survivor engagement. Now you are advocating for human-centered approach, which I really applaud you for. Thank you very much. By the way, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, please write your questions in the chat and just write, for example, at Yep or at Yona, if you want to get an immediate answer. Thank you very much, Yep. Next, it's one of our own, David Awusi. Excuse me for my Ugandan Dutch accent. Hope I pronounced this well. He is a global survivor leader and the executive director of Youth Rise International and a passionate advocate against modern-day slavery and human trafficking. David is also a policy influencer, a consultant, and a climate change activist contributing to the global discussion and research on modern-day slavery. Also, he's assistant chair for the African Survivor Coalition technical team. Without further ado, I present David. The floor is yours. David?
Okay, sorry. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. I bring you greetings from Ghana, West Africa. And thank you, Malaika and Joy, for the wonderful work we are doing. It's been a great privilege to be part of this vision that is empowering survivors in Africa to thrive. I'm really passionate about advocacy because survivors and survivor leaders in the past have been marginalized. They need to have their voice back. They need to influence policies that make life better for them. Today, I want to talk to you about online exploitation in the context of human trafficking and cybersecurity. Using Ghana as a case study, Ghana passed the Cybersecurity Act in the year 2020, that's Act 1038. And based on this act, Section 2 of the Cybersecurity Act 2020 is supposed to establish a cybersecurity authority that's supposed to work to protect children and adult and young people online. Reviewing this act, please, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so reviewing this act and the policies that have been set up over the past few days shows that, one, people are not able to have access to justice because of lack of awareness. The awareness on human trafficking, the awareness on the Cybersecurity Act and the law that criminalizes online exploitation, such as child grooming, sextortion, and all these things, are very low. Also, there's these issues of weakness in our government legal justice system. So, for instance, like one of the speakers said, the burden of proof is upon the victim. And these victims do not even know about the law that protects them online, and the fact that it is even their right to be able to report and seek for justice when they are being violated or exploited. So how do they lead evidence? And part of the weakening in the legal system is the fact that a lot of the law enforcement officers, the police officers, and the lawyers are not really trained on the law. But this law was passed just 5 years ago. And so when such cases are brought to them, they don't even know how to lead part of the social investigations. They are not aware of the trauma-informed approaches in terms of how to handle survivors. For instance, you get a case where it's being sent to police station, and both the perpetrator and the victim are in the same space and leading discussions. And so and probably if this person is a child or a minor, how do they confront a very adult person who is very influential in society in the same space, the police station, going through questioning and interrogation? So because of that, they get intimidated, they get re-traumatized, they get victimized, and then they are not able to proceed with the cases. So these are just some of the gaps that prevent young people and survivors just of accessing justice of those who are exploited online. And there's this issue of stigmatization, the cultural dimension of it, where people think that if a young person was exploited online, maybe some of his sexual images are spread out there, it even blackmail, it's a crime, and whoever that does is subject to be prosecuted. they feel very embarrassed even talking about how can I go to the police station and report that somebody leaked my naked pictures or leaked a sexual encounter between myself and another person online, and the fact that it's a crime, the person needs to be prosecuted. They get embarrassed, they get scolded, they get rebuked, and they are called names, quote unquote, they are sport children. And so because of the stigma that comes with it, survivors rather want to keep it to themselves instead of opening up and sharing issues of law engagement system. And then the last gap that is in our legal system in terms of survivors assessing justice for cases of online exploitation is cost. So of course, justice is expensive. You don't have money. I remember when one of the courses I took in the law school, one of my law lecturers taught us that if you don't have time, you don't have money, you do not litigate. And that is true in the legal system. You need to have money, you need to have time to be able to go through the legal system. And these are very vulnerable young people, children, young adults who barely have a job. And so they are not able to pay for the cost of assessing legal support. Of course, the government has a legal aid board that's supposed to provide access, but in terms of as to whether the funds they have and the ability to provide support is another discussion for another day. So because of these issues, in terms of low awareness, weakness in the legal system, stigmatization, and how expensive it is to access justice, a lot of survivors and survivor leaders who get exploited online are not able to seek for justice. So how do we address this? For us at Youth Rise International, we've been part of this process for a while, and one of our proposal, recommendation, is also evidence in law, and also research is the fact that there should be high level of legal education. And that's something we do very well. We need to educate young people. There's a Data Protection Act that protects your data. You have right to privacy, you have right to confidentiality. Nobody has the right to share any information about you that is private to other people without your informed consent. And anybody that does that violate your right to privacy is your fundamental human right. You can actually take a legal action against them to protect yourself. So this level of awareness need to be expanded to using social media, using traditional media, to make sure that young people know their right and what to do to assert justice when those rights of privacy and protection online is violated. The next one is also increasing access to legal aid. Since it's expensive to access support, and because of that, they are not able to access support, we recommend that there should be a way that survivors who are involved in such situations are given, their legal fees are covered. We have a case study where the survivor was living far in the rural community, and they have to be transported to the city, to the court. And sometime in a month, they have to go twice. And no such cases takes like 5 years, 6 years. And so the cost of transportation alone, they couldn't afford, so they have to lose interest in the case. So some of these costs, and there were cases where the survivors will come, they cannot go because where they are coming from to the city, they have to get a hotel accommodation to stay in, and the cost of paying for a hotel to stay for 2-3 days and all that. So these are the real costs that they have to incur. So if there's any way that we can provide some kind of grant or support to survivors who are going through such cases to cover their cost of transport, the cost of accommodation, and get some very good lawyers to support them to go through the process, that will also help them to get more justice. And then last and not the least, also training law enforcement officers. That's something that my organization has been doing for some time. We train some lawyers, some judges, train some police officers on the law, the Cybersecurity Act, on the Human Trafficking Act, in trauma-informed processes, in adjudication, in evidence gathered, in prosecution, go to the whole trial processes. So survivors are not victimized and traumatized in the process, but they are handled with care, they are handled with sensitivity, their mental health is being highlighted, and they feel safe to give evidence, and they feel secure that they can go through the process, have access to justice, and still they be okay. The last recommendation will be empowerment of survivor-led organizations. So in the past, if you come back together, for instance, most funding goes to the state organizations, but they are not able to, most survivors are not even comfortable to report cases to the government because of bureaucracy and the delay. They rather feel more comfortable coming to survivor-led organizations like us and report their cases to because they know they will support and assist them to go through the process. So changing our grant making model to directly support, fund, and resource survivor-led organization in Africa, where they can have a hotline number the survivor can call survivor-led organizations, reach out to them, and then they will have the resources to make sure that they can provide all the necessary resources that these survivors would need to be able to go through the justice system and then receive justice in a timely manner. I believe that when these 4 recommendations have been looked at in terms of legal education for survivors and the general education on issues of cyber security and cyber protection and their right to sue and to seek for justice, issues of increasing access to justice for survivor leaders and survivors, and then the third one, training law enforcement agencies on the law that protect them, cyber security laws, and then also on trauma-informed care. And then finally, empowering survivor-led organizations with the skills, the capacity, and the resources to directly provide the cost, the safety, the security, and protection for survivors who have to go through the legal system to ensure that they are defended and protected and they are safe. I'm sorry if I was a bit fast. I know I have just like 8 minutes to speak, so I just want to share this with all of us. Thank you so much for your time, and then I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you for those wonderful recommendations from not only Ghana, from a survivor leader who has been very instrumental in advocating for victims accessing justice. One takeaway thing that I think resonates with me, especially when it comes to victim identification, victim support, and the numbers that exist when it comes to African victims, African victims, is that justice is expensive. And I think this makes it very difficult for us to say human rights are universal rights when they are only for the few who can afford them. And the highest majority of victims and survivors cannot afford justice. For that reason, sometimes when we see indicators and numbers in countries of victims that have been identified, you say, but I think even in my workforce, I see more than what the whole general country is seeing. Few cases make it to the court. So in our next steps, in our next thinking about what is very important is also to think about how do we make justice accessible? Who is going to pay for this pro bono fee? Why isn't it for free? But anyway, thank you for highlighting it. That's why in this webinar, we wanted this conversation to be contextual and intentional. Where, for example, in the Netherlands, some of the things like access to justice and pro bono lawyers and stuff like that is mandatory by governments. But in most of the African countries, that is a dream far from being reached. Next in the line is Victoria Nyangura. She's a passionate advocate for women and children in conflict zones with over a decade of experience in peace building. She currently serves as the head of the school at St. Bakeshta, Vocational Training Center. Victoria is also a 2024 Aurora Award nominee, a chairperson of the UN Voluntary Trust Fund Board, and a founder of the Women in Action. She's dedicated in empowering vulnerable communities and advancing global survivor network. Also, she's a member of the advisory team for the African Survivor Coalition. Without further ado, I welcome you, Victoria. But before you go ahead to introduce yourself, I want you to reflect on these questions. As you mentioned that you're really passionate about women affairs, and according to the report, women and girls constitute 61% of the detected trafficking victims globally, often exploited in domestic work and sexual exploitation. What empowerment strategies are critical to addressing structural inequalities that heighten women's vulnerability to trafficking in Africa and best practice in Uganda? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Malaika. I want to say thank you to Footprint to Freedom, African Survivor Coalition members, the UNODC that you're partnering with this, and to all the listeners. I am glad that you've asked me that question. I want to be as raw as possible, just borrowing from a personal experience. One, I'm a survivor of trafficking in the context of the LRA war. And knowing I spent 8 years in captivity, returned and went back to school, I have always viewed education, empowerment of women as something that is very, very, very important. Why? Us in Africa, it's not just Uganda. People who don't have it will always find it hard to say something in the community. And even if you say it, few will listen to you. Your ideas may never be taken as important. So knowing that the gaps, just like the previous speaker just said, speakers, that we already have gaps. Women find it hard to access justice in terms of reporting cases of what they have gone through, having legal representation, even just transporting yourself to go to court, to have your family stand by you to get witnesses is a challenge. So I will just speak from a personal experience that anyone who is empowered will always have opportunity. And I view empowerment is in different contexts. One, a young woman who is sent to school to study will first of all understand her self-worth, what it takes to be where they are. And once they're in that context, they will also have opportunity to be employed where they earn a living. Somebody who is employed will earn some money. The money helps you, first of all, to meet your daily needs, the needs of your family, and the needs of the people around you. It is very, very hard to convince someone who is already at that angle to be able to follow you into something or divert their attention. What about the one who cannot go into formal education? Just building their capacity to know that irrespective of where they are, they can get skills, the skills that they then use at that level to do work that enables them to earn something for themselves, their family. At the same time, it's what we are looking for in terms of empowering of women. Here, I have over 100 girls. Each year, we are passing them out. And we have seen over time that the number of the girls who get pregnant after getting skills keeps reducing. The ones who do not have opportunity to be in school, they continue to face the same challenge. This already justifies why empowering women economically is very important. Socially, by making them have their self-esteem, the confidence to speak, the confidence to stand for their friends, their sisters where they live is very, very important. Then for people who are empowered, it's very easy for you to seek justice for yourself, for the people around you, and everywhere where you go. And it's on this ground that I emphasize the need to empower women. For those who are not in school, how do you empower them? Here we have self-help groups. Women gather together. When they gather together, they tell their stories. It is through telling the stories that you get to understand what your friends or you're going through. Together, the women of WOW, we have Women's Advocacy Network, they get to look for representation, and our voices are stronger than one voice, which is why African Survivor Coalition is very important. If we continue to speak together like this, work together, brainstorm ideas, we are going to be able to help ourselves around the world, to speak for the voices of the voiceless, to speak for those who are really voiceless, for them to be heard. So I see organizing ourselves in groups at local levels, sharing experiences, continuing to support each other, walking ourselves, our friends to courts, to police, enables even the local leaders to be accountable. Because even perpetrators, when they know that these women have not come to end today, they will be hesitant to commit a crime because they know that the team of women are going to keep following them up until somebody is arrested, until someone is prosecuted, and so forth. Then the empowerment is also helping us in the other way. Survivors often get re-stigmatized because of what they have passed through. So if one is empowered, they then get to meet the needs, but the fact that they are very strong, they are capable of leading their life, leading that independence life, makes it hard for even a spouse or families within where they live to really attack them or re-stigmatize them through abusive words, plus other things. So for me, I am here to say that for us to succeed in making sure that our voices are heard loud and clear, we will have to help empower our other survivors wherever we are in different ways, sending individuals to school, building capacities, even to speak, the capacity for one to advocate, capacity for people to speak wherever they are so they can also inform decisions is going to help us. We want to see ourselves as survivors, become part of leaders in our communities at national levels all around the world to make sure things are working out for us. And it is on this ground that I have remained to work in the context. I've been centering around each and anything that would enable any other young woman, young girl, to be empowered in different aspects like I've explained, so they can stand firm, they can speak for themselves, stand for their families, the communities where they live, and also keep speaking this around the world so we can, together our experiences and wisdoms that we share, get to speak into what we all go through. So my dear friends, empowerment is a key tool. If we have it in any way, let us add education, skills development in each and everything we do to make sure that survivors are well taken care of. It is on that ground also that any other survivor that is returning, they will have the hope. If Victoria was able to go through this is how she is. What about me? I think if I have the opportunity and people stand with me, I can just be like one of them and so forth. So it's us who are going to create the hope and the inspiration for our other survivors there. Thank you so very much. I didn't want to be a professional person. I just wanted to share my personal experience as well as it is. And I want to conclude by saying, of course, it is still these women. I want to conclude by saying empowerment is a crucial tool for bridging protection gaps and ensuring that women can lead independent and dignified lives by investing in education, economic opportunities, and policy reforms. Stakeholders can create a support environment where women can contribute to society and break free from cycles of vulnerability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. One thing I love about working with you is that you are a true testimony of what resilience is all about. Also, what a powerful asset as we survivors, that we use our experiences not only to empower others, but our experiences itself inform the gaps, either in access to restoration. One thing that I also wanted to take away or to add on, that as empowerment has got some element like going to school skills, but at the same time, we should make empowerment personal, because when we, in most solutions, we have one size fits all empowerment solutions. But we want to make sure that we understand that every survivor has got their needs, their interests, and their skills, that empowerment is tailored and customized to really communicate who the person is. Thank you very much for being vulnerable, but at the same time as a leader. That's what makes you a very powerful leader. Now we're going to move to Senegal. We're going to do a bit of French. So please, for those ones who have not clicked on their language part, please do so. As you know, the African Survivor Coalition not only represent our diversity, but also it brings regional diversity, but also in languages. So we are trying to be inclusive. It's a learning process, bear with us. But on the stage, we are bringing Mr. Abdou Aziz, a founder of two impactful associations in Senegal. He leads the network of reciprocal exchanges of knowledge and coordinates the global network of religions for children in Senegal. He's also the founder of Citizen Movement for Peace and Harmony. Through his effort, he has empowered over 800 individuals and transformed over 3,500 marginalized youth. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Abdou to share with us a small presentation, actually focusing on gaps in child protection system and the practical steps to safeguard children, focusing on Senegal. Monsieur Abdou, the floor is yours.
Bonjour. Bonjour, monsieur. Bonjour, Hervé. Merci. Merci aussi de l'occasion qui m'a été donnée pour parler surtout d'un problème qui devient une véritable gangrène, je pense, au Sénégal et en Afrique. C'est parler à la fois du système de protection de l'enfance au Sénégal, mais surtout des lacunes dans le système de protection et peut-être ensemble essayer de décliner les différentes étapes. Mais je dois déjà vous dire que le Sénégal est en principe signataire de presque tous les accords qui convergent à la protection de l'enfant. Mais je pense qu'en dehors du système qui lui est propre, il y a un facteur extrêmement important qui explique la situation des enfants, surtout en ce qui concerne la protection de ces enfants. C'est le volet culturel. Parce que si on se réfère à la situation, je pense que j'ai donné des chiffres. Je ne sais pas si ça peut passer les chiffres, les stats que j'ai montrés. Sinon, le Sénégal, comme je l'ai dit, il est tantôt signataire. Voilà. Les principes fondamentaux de la protection de l'enfant, comme je le dis, je pense que c'est important, même si on essaie de rappeler que ça s'appuie sur 4 piliers. Il y a la non-discrimination, l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant, le droit de vivre, de se développer, le droit. Ça, moi, je pense que c'est les droits qui, actuellement, dans des pays où il y a vraiment la mendicité forcée, comme nous le voyons tous les jours, vous direz que est-ce que le système a été vraiment mis en pratique? Si, mais plus tard, on reviendra sur qu'est-ce qui rend faible le système de protection. Et je m'en vais vous dire qu'il y aura peut-être un volet extrêmement important à présent, c'est le volet culturel, qui est extrêmement très sensible. Et chaque jour, à chaque fois qu'une protection de l'enfant est attaquée, en général, vous verrez que le facteur culturel reste le véritable responsable. C'est vrai? Bon, maintenant, le Sénégal, par exemple, le Sénégal, il est victime un peu parce que les pays limitrophes du Sénégal, les frontières, avec la porosité des frontières, ont contribué à le véritable transfert d'enfants de la sous-région qui s'explique peut-être par la crise, ou de toute façon, ils sont là et ils occupent l'espace public, ils occupent la rue. Ce n'est pas parce que le système ne fonctionne pas, mais comme je l'ai dit tantôt, c'est juste parce qu'en dehors de la situation sociale et économique, il y a aussi des raisons culturelles qui peuvent l'expliquer cela. Et comme je l'ai dit, vous savez, pratiquement dans toutes les régions, dans toutes les régions, vous verrez que le système fonctionne avec la mise en place de comités départementaux de protection de l'enfant. Il y a aussi également des comités de veille qui sont là pour alerter sur certaines maltraitances ou certaines des travaux forcés des enfants, petits-enfants que l'on voit dans les chantiers en train de travailler. Sinon aussi, il y a les mariages forcés. Et les mariages forcés ont le plus souvent un soubassement culturel. Parce que déjà, l'enfant est marié à partir de 5 ans par son cousin ou un ami de la famille qui est apparenté à qui déjà cet enfant est destiné. Donc, ça, il y a aussi que les pratiques culturelles. Mais cela ne veut pas dire que le système n'existe pas. Le système, il est bien en place, comme je vous l'ai dit. Le Sénégal est signataire de beaucoup de conventions qui parlent, qui traitent des droits des enfants. Et le plus important d'ailleurs, pour que le président en personne, c'est lui qui le gère et c'est une structure qui est logée même au niveau du palais. Mais quand je vous donne les chiffres, par exemple, à côté de ça, il y a ce qu'on appelle les faux talibés, c'est-à-dire c'est les faux élèves de l'école coranique. Et quand je vous donne le chiffre, pour vous dire que à travers le Sénégal, selon certaines organisations, mais bien sûr avec des caméras cachées et des recherches cachées, ils ont pu décompter 700 000 faux élèves talibés. Voilà, je reviens sur par rapport à la situation. 24% des enfants sont victimes de travail abusif ou dangereux. 14% des filles de moins de 15 ans sont déjà excisées. Et ce qui est très grave maintenant, parce qu'il ne peut plus attendre qu'ils aient 8 ans ou 9 ans pour le faire. Mais maintenant, c'est à la naissance même que la fille est excisée, uniquement pour juste masquer cette maltraitance. Vous voyez également aussi, comme je l'ai dit, 26% des filles de 15 à 17 ans ont été victimes de violences physiques ou sexuelles. Ça veut dire que c'est révélé après qu'on le sache. Mais c'est des pratiques tout récemment au Sénégal, tout à fait à l'Est. On a arrêté des femmes qui font la pratique de l'excision chez les filles. Et il y a 11 filles qui ont été excisées et la plus âgée, elle a 6 ans. Donc voilà les pratiques. Slide. Je vais encore dire qu'il y a ce qu'on appelle dans les solutions. Dans les solutions, parce que les pratiques, les lacunes dont je pense que c'est partagé, c'est juste le manque, nous allons le voir, c'est le manque de renforcement du cadre, mais le cadre existe. Il y a également aussi la vulnérabilité, c'est-à-dire que le problème économique, il explique aussi. Mais je reviens toujours pour dire qu'il y a d'autres pratiques qui vont même s'y ajouter, telles que tous ces marabouts qui reçoivent les élèves, tous ces marabouts qui, sous l'étiquette du Coran, disent qu'ils enseignent à cet enfant. Je vous dis que tous ces marabouts sont des gens extrêmement influents. Ils sont très influents et ils ont un poids électoral. C'est-à-dire qu'ils peuvent faire perdre un candidat lors des élections présidentielles ou quelles que soient les élections législatives. Donc, ils ont un poids et sont censés donner des consignes de non-vote pour faire perdre. Donc, les politiciens sont obligés de ne pas respecter, le système pour juste plaire à un système pareil. Donc, ce qui fait que il faudrait vraiment qu'on revienne sur les sanctions. Et il n'a jamais été signalé véritablement des sanctions qui ont été allouées à des gens qui ont porté toute cette maltraitance ou ces sévices à ces enfants. Et c'est là où je parle aussi de coordination entre les acteurs. Voilà. Donc, moi, toutes les initiatives, on va revenir sur ça, mais toutes les initiatives, tout a été dit. Le renforcement des lois. On a vu des ateliers dans les acteurs communautaires ou des acteurs de la justice avec les forces de défense et surtout les comités de veille dans ces quartiers qui ont créé des ateliers de renforcement pour discuter des systèmes et prendre des initiatives. Mais le problème reste toujours entier. Les sensibilisations ont été faites avec les porteurs de voix auprès des acteurs sociaux et même aussi on a créé il y a eu des prétextes en organisant des ateliers avec des organisations seules dans le cadre d'échange des bonnes pratiques. Mais il n'empêche que toujours c'est visible, les enfants sont là en train de manger, les enfants sont là et dorment dans les trottoirs. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'il faut? C'est la grande question. Et pourtant, il a été initié. Il a été initié ce qu'on appelle des écoles coraniques modernes, où vraiment, ils ont installé tout ce qu'il y a. Il y a de l'eau potable, il y a les soins, il y a une bonne éducation aussi inclusive, mais n'empêche que la maltraitance, elle est là, toujours présente, et il suffit juste de sortir. À titre d'exemple, la ville qui est la plus proche de chez moi ici, il y a 514 fausses écoles qui utilisent juste les enfants pour les faire manger. Il y a en présence dans la rue ces enfants aussi de talibés, qu'on appelle les enfants magnats. Ils ont été dénombrés il y a à peu près 3 mois. Ils sont au chiffre de 14 000 enfants. Et on les voit. Donc, pour dire que le système est là, existant, mais en pratique, il n'a pas beaucoup évolué en termes de protection de l'enfant. Peut-être qu'il faudrait, avec encore beaucoup plus de sensibilisation, beaucoup plus de tonalité dans la voix, mais comme je vous l'ai dit aussi, il y a cette volonté politique des États qui vacille un peu, qui tremble un peu, parce que dans le souci des élections, parce que ces marabouts qui sont en quelque sorte indexés, c'est des véritables porteurs de voix et ils ont le poids sur la balance électorale. Ce qui fait que la sanction ne tombe pas comme cela se devait. Si je peux passer à... Voilà, donc, moi je pense que si je dois me résumer, si je dois revenir par rapport à... Bon, ça, les citations, elles sont là, c'est très beau, les enfants sont les ressources les plus précieuses du monde et sont des espoirs pour l'avenir, selon John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Aussi que la moralité d'une société se mesure à ce qu'elle fait pour ses enfants. À chaque action compte. Travaillons ensemble pour que les enfants africains grandissent dans un environnement sûr, bienveillant, à l'abri des abus et d'exploitation. Moi, je vais ajouter qu'on a dit, dis-moi quelle jeunesse tu as et je te dirai quel peuple tu seras. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdou from Senegal, and thank you for zooming in the situation of child trafficking in Senegal. We thought that it's very important to really highlight this because even in the whole global report, they indicated that children are the most impacted and the most vulnerable population when it comes to human trafficking. The quote that resonated with me, that children are the most important resource. It makes sense, but unfortunately, they are the most vulnerable to exploitation in the world today, which makes us question how are we taking care of our most important resource. Next, we wanted to also highlight something that even though we've identified these gaps and some of the instruments that are not working, we wanted also to bring an example of what happens if children are empowered. What happens when we use children as a resource to be the change? This is a small video for one of our program. Iona mentioned it well, that technology literacy, we use it as a tool to fight human trafficking. Can you please play the short video?
I have a job which can help your family financially. Are you interested? What is it? You will be taking care for a rich family's child. They will be paying you well. That sounds well. Yes. Now, what we are going to do, let me hand you my number. You will call me. Okay. Volume. 077. Yes. 38. Yes. 38. 18. Okay. Yes. Bye. Hey, Mr. Johnson. Hey. How are you? How are you? Where can I find you? Now what you do, move to the main road. Are you there? Yes. Go to that corner. Yes. Move to the big house. Yes. And then get that corner there. Move to the house garage there. In that corner. Move to the ghetto and you will find me there. Yes. 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 I'm going to get a job. I have come. Where's the house which you have been telling me? What are you talking about? A house? Yes. A house. Yes. No, which one? Shut up. No. Shut up. No. Listen. I'm going to call my mom. No, my mom. Shut up. Shut up.
Thank you for sharing that clip. We decided to cut. It's a big conversation. It might not make sense, but it was really empowering the kids to fit in the shoes of the trafficker, know the red flags, know the language of coercion, but at the same time, it's an integrated program that is of IT, using IT, information technology, to equip the youngsters to understand human trafficking. You'll find the bigger video on our website when it's loaded. Now, the next part is a very essential. It's going to talk about areas that are of neglect, yet they are very instrumental. I'm going to hand over to Joy to take over.
Thank you very much, Malaika, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Joy Kingsley, and I'm the Movements Coordinator for Footprints to Freedom. And sorry, I'm going to be stepping in for Griselda, who just had a little emergency. I would like to say thank you first to the members of the Footprints Kids Club for that beautiful drama. I mean, the dramatization reminds us how real and close to home the issue of exploitation can be. And thank you to those very young performers. To begin us with this next section of the panel, we're honored to have with us Bernadette Agano. Bernadette is a passionate advocate for women's rights, and she's also the program manager for Free the Slaves in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She's also a leader with the National Task Force for Alliance 8.7 and a survival leader who uses her personal journey and talents to inspire. Bernadette will be speaking to us this afternoon or morning on the impact of conflict and political instability on women and children in the DRC. I know a lot of us are aware of the issues going on in Democratic Republic of Congo, and would have Bernadette speak into that and how it exacerbates trafficking risks. Bernadette, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Joy. Hi everybody. I hope you guys are hearing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to this wonderful webinar, which is very insightful. And thanks to the previous intervenant. And thank you also, Malaika Joy, for thinking of this webinar. I feel it was really, really needed. Yeah. So talking about the DRC, human trafficking, modern slavery situation, according to the war, the 30 years plus war that have been going on in the DRC. So the DRC has long been plagued by armed conflict, especially in eastern regions, leading to widespread human rights violation, including forced labor, sexual violence, sexual exploitation, and child labor. So these issues are really exasperated by ongoing conflict, particularly, as I said, in eastern provinces, which is North Kivu and South Kivu in the eastern DRC. The armed group exploit vulnerable populations, subjecting them to forced labor, especially in mining operations and also in agriculture. Children are often recruited as soldiers, forced to work under very, very hazardous conditions. But they have been kept silent. They are fighting for their lives. So they've been just shut down. Yeah, so as I was saying, the Eastern DRC has been a hotspot for armed conflict involving various rebels groups and foreign militias. These conflicts led to mass displacement. I hope you guys have seen it on the TVs. We had, I don't know if I may say this, but I think we are one of the biggest, like one of the top 5 of the countries that have the biggest refugees camp in Africa, you know. So as I was saying, these conflicts have led to really, really mass displacement, creating a fertile ground for human trafficking and modern slavery. In country displaced individuals, especially women and children, they are really at a high risk of exploitations. So the proliferation of armed groups has also resulted in widespread sexual violence, sexual exploitation. There is even a report in 2024 that highlighted that over a 5-month period, more than 1 in 10 women aged from 20 to 44 in North Kivu have been raped, primarily by armed groups. Here we are talking about rape, but let's talk about those women that have been sequestrated in the camp, in the military camps, being exploited by rebels, sometimes by military. So this is what is happening. There is another side of it, which is a cross-border dynamic in neighboring countries. So as maybe some of you may know, the DRC shares borders with 9 countries, making cross-border dynamic crucial in understanding human trafficking and modern slavery. Porous borders facilitate the movement of armed groups and traffickers. For example, in Beni territory in the North Kivu, in Eastern DRC, fertile agricultural land attract the attention of various armed groups who engage in smuggling network into neighboring of Eastern countries such as Uganda, etc. So these network often involved the trafficking of minerals and agricultural products, with profit fueling further conflicts and exploitation. And in these agricultural lands, children are being used, especially for cotton. Children are being used for their small hands. They have been forced to work into those agricultural land. So this is what is happening according to agriculture and child labor. So talking about forced labor and child exploitation again, especially in the cocoa plantations. So, you know, DRC is not among the top cocoa producer, but particularly in the East, there is a rise in cocoa cultivation. So the surge in global cocoa prices has attracted armed group seeking to profit from this lucrative market. So this group exploit local farmers and engage in smuggling cocoa into Uganda, bypassing official channels. So how does this have a relation with forced labor? So most of the time, rebel uses the citizen of these cities to carry the cocoa from their villages to the borders, you know. So this trade-off involved, like as I was saying, forced labor and the exploitation of children. These children, they don't have access to education or basic rights, and this is because of the war. They don't have this opportunity to go to school, because how can you go to school while there are bombs? Or how can you go to school while you hear in the news that there have been like 10, 20, 30 kids killed at school? So they just stay at home, and this is one of the things that lead them to being into this child labor, being obliged to work for these rebels. Another point is most of the armed group are using sexual violence, sexual exploitation as a weapon of war. So these have been systematically used in the DRC. And this is not only from this side of the country, but this is everywhere the rebels are. So women and girls are subjected to rape, sexual exploitation, and other form of sexual violence by armed group aiming to terrorize communities, as I said, control over resources-rich areas. So the prevalence of this atrocity have severe physical and psychological impact on survivors and contribute to the breakdown of social structures. So as I was saying, human trafficking, modern slavery, ongoing conflict in the DRC present a very complex humanitarian crisis. So as survival leader, as Malaika said when she was introducing me, as also Free the Slave, the program coordinator for Free the Slave in the DRC, we really have been working on this with multifaceted approach, including strengthening legal framework, enhancing cross-border cooperation, supporting survivors, and addressing the root causes of conflict and exploitation, because we have come to a conclusion that there is this really, really need of sensitization. People need to know, because most of the time they have born in this situation, so culturally it have become normal for them. It's their normal way of living, while it should not. So there is this huge need of sensitization. We really, really need to talk about this. So we have created this network of survivor where we have been working on implementing some survivor peer-to-peer solution, like bringing together survivors, as I was saying, as a network to protect and support each other. We have been also really producing effort on creating safe spaces for survivor, advocating for policy changes, providing economic empowerment when we can, and also ensuring access to healthcare and psychosocial support, which is very, very extremely important. Imagine a survivor, you are a survivor of human trafficking, you are a survivor of war. It's just, it's just something, but yeah. So as I was saying, however, with much of this side of the country now under rebels control, none of this is currently possible. In Goma, where I'm living, where I'm at right now is in the Eastern DRC, and now it's unfortunately controlled by rebels. So we are kind of blocked. Human rights activists are shut down, cannot speak publicly. I have seen some of my friends being captured, being kidnapped. Till now, we don't know where they are. This is the situation in which we are, but thanks God we are safe and alive for now. So as I was saying, survivors are once again at extreme risk. We have seen these refugees camp empty now. We don't know where. Like for example, for me, I had a network of survivors in the refugees camp. I have no contact with them. I don't know where they are for now. So it's really, really a very difficult situation to be at. I'm really thinking every day of these people, these sisters and brothers of mine. And I hope one day, I really hope they are safe. And I hope one day we will come to be together again and talk about healing and everything. So thank you so much. But before I finish, I also want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to everyone on this platform and within the coalition for taking time to check on us during this difficult time. As I speak to you today, as I was saying, I'm in one of the cities currently occupied by the rivers, and your prayers and word of compassion have been a great source of support for us. So thank you so much for standing with us in this dark moment. Thank you so much. Over to you, Joy.
So much, Benedict, and thank you for sharing your powerful insight and for giving us your first-hand experience as to what's happening in the DRC and also how you're leading some of the very impactful programs there. You mentioned about one key takeaway that you mentioned is the critical role of local communities, especially in the area of education and also enhancing cross-border cooperation and also protection networks. So thank you so much once again for that. And you have also highlighted the area of healing as survivors. And as we look into that, I would like to bring up Eva Wokush to speak into the area of mental health, importance of the tailored mental health approach for survivors. Eva is the Executive Director of MESFERO, Impact for Resilience and SDG 2030. She's a global expert in mental health advocacy, digital transformation, and leadership development, and has also created online learning programs on human trafficking and resilience. Over to you, Eva. Would love to hear your perspective into mental health, especially tailored mental health for survivors.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Joy. And what I must say at the very beginning, thank you also to Footprint to Freedom and the African Survivor Coalition and Malaika and Joy for organizing this very, very important meeting. Now, let's look at the glow tip report first. So it takes a holistic approach to mental health for survivors of trafficking. It talks about mental and physical well-being and providing opportunities for personal, social, and economic development. I agree with all of that 100%. But you know, the problem is that on the ground, a lot of that stuff is just not available. You know what I mean? What happens if you have severe trauma, but you don't have any money? And even if you did, there's no resources available where you live. As Victoria very beautifully mentioned, you know, what if you speak, but nobody listens? And what if you're in a last mile setting and you don't really have internet, and so you can't connect that way? And so I think that when we look at mental health solutions, we really need to get practical and see what would actually work. Now, as Hiab in his very beautiful opening mentioned, these open wounds. The thing, of course, that you know about mental health wounds often just cannot be seen. And these really deep trauma wounds don't end when the trafficking ends. Often that's when they come out even more, because finally you have a place to be safe. And so sometimes people might behave in a strange way or something, and other that would cause more stigma. Now, what are some of the solutions? I'll give you my perspective. One, if there were any time for innovation, it's right now. And I so strongly believe that people with lived experience in trafficking must be involved in designing the mental health systems that serve them. And they must be paid for that work, or at least directly benefit from the resources. So those of you who are here and who have lived experience, you are the experts. And others must learn from you, and you must be compensated for your contribution, 100%. Now, many times we will talk about a tailored approach to mental health. This is very, very important, but it's really important to see who is doing the tailoring. Far too often, this kind of US or EU model of mental health is just like thrown onto different countries. And it's like, here, do this, this works. But even Africa in and of itself, every single country in Africa has a different approach, and that has to be respected, and that has to be reflected in the mental health support systems. Something that I also feel very strongly about in terms of thinking of the contributions of people with lived experience in trafficking is the self-healing mechanisms that you have developed are so important. I'm thinking, for example, I know somebody who did a lot of healing just through breathing techniques. Nobody taught him that. He just came up with that. And so how you have self-healed, all of that should be honored, and it should be understood, and it should be scaled far more than some graph, you know, from some EU or US person. Now, there's something that I would like to talk about that I feel is so important, and that is that it's really critical to understand who is a practitioner and who is a counselor and who is not. The reason this is important is because this is a legal issue. And so when you are setting up programs in your various countries, let's look at South Africa, for example. In order for a person in South Africa to say that he or she is a counselor or a psychotherapist or whatever, there are very specific legal things you have to do. One, you have to have a bachelor's in psychology. Then you have to have a master's in psychology from a South African university. Then you have to have supervision. And then you have to join specific agencies or specific organizations. When you've done that, you legally are allowed to say that you are a counselor in South Africa. And it's totally different in every country in Africa. And this is there for a reason. It protects people from not being exploited when they are in therapy. And so what's very important is to realize that whoever it is that you choose for your specific, to be your mental health counselor or whatever for your group, must be certified in that specific country. Somebody certified in Uganda can't do it legally in DRC unless they've passed specific tests. The reason I'm going into this a lot is because I have seen NGOs get into trouble with this, legal trouble, when it wasn't necessary. But let's say that you've got a mental health practitioner who's certified in Kenya, and that certified person sets up a peer-to-peer network to have people counsel each other. That's okay, because the original person was certified. There's that. Anyway, let's talk about other kinds of solutions. Bernadette gave us a really, really important and painful overview of what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, including the prevalence of rape. Now, I think what's really important to note here is that the world leader in dealing with this kind of thing is actually African. I'm sure you have heard of Dr. Denis Mukwege, who won a Nobel Peace Prize for his foundation's holistic approach to supporting people subjected to wartime sexual violence. He is African. And, he came up with this amazing solution that's now being used in Ukraine and all over the world. Maybe the African Survivor Coalition will come up with something also that will be used all across the world with your wisdom and with your lessons learned. So let's look at some examples of, well, what is an effective way to adapt mental health interventions to really diverse survivor populations? Okay, so one, any solution has to be community-based and holistic. As I said before, lived experience has to lead. In my view, the solution has to be able to scale. You know what I mean? It has to be safe and it has to be legal. And also people who don't have money and who are in last mile settings need to be able to get the same kind of services. Now, another thing to think about, what if you have populations that are at special risk of being trafficked? How can you reach those people with mental health and other support before they're trafficked to make them less vulnerable? For example, the GLOW-TIP report said that in 2022, 62% of trafficking victims detected in North Africa were children. But in contrast, during the same time, around 60% in the Middle East were women. So how could we reach out before they're trafficked to build capacity? And then the final thing I would like to talk about is what David was talking about, and that's technology sometimes has dangers, and we need to look at that. I'll tell you what my view on this is, and what I personally am working on right now, and I am honored to be able to work with Footprint to Freedom and hopefully ASC on this. And that is, there's something called peace tech right now. So there's educational technology, ed tech, fintech, which is financial technology, but there's something called peace tech. And I'm very interested in this. It uses something called blockchain to provide information, like, for example, small lessons, small e-learning things that you can get through your mobile phone. And then when you finish one of them, you can actually get money. Money can be sent through the mobile phone. And so I'm developing a project on trauma mitigation right now that will use that to reach out to what Ioana was talking about. And that is if you can get the community leaders and the schools to really understand these concepts, and if you can reward them for doing so, and if you can actively use their ideas and their voices in the context of rewarding people, then it's just a whole brand new world. You know, then it's like you don't need internet access so much. Somebody who's not allowed to leave home, but who has a mobile phone, will be able to receive information, will be able to receive support in a way. And the thing about blockchain is that it's completely, utterly safe. Nobody can track it. Traffickers cannot track this. So on a personal level, I see this as a very interesting thing, as a next step to try to build capacity. But what I would like to close with is this, again, looking at Dr. Mukwege. He came up with something that, in DRC, he came up with something that literally changed the world. You know, it was innovation based on heart and soul and very painful experience. But what he has come up with has changed the world. And I, again, would say, I think you can also change the world with innovation and putting your experience together in a way that will scale. Everything is possible. And once again, it's a complete honor to be connected to this. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you so much for highlighting the importance of culturally sensitive and trauma-informed mental health support, and how survivors should be at the heart of programs and initiatives. Thank you so much. It's clear that no two survivors' journey are the same, and the tailored care is very essential for long-term healing. And your insight into integrating mental health with survival-led integration will help us rethink how support is designed and also delivered. So thank you so much, Heather. I'm going to be bringing in our final speaker for today. She's the founder and executive director of CASMA Charity Organization and the chairperson of Ethiopia Survival-Led Coalition. She's also a survivor and a passionate advocate and a core member of the African Survival Coalition. Please join me as we welcome Yenene Stilahu. And she's going to be speaking on the vulnerabilities and best practices in supporting survivors of labor trafficking in the Middle East. Over to you, Yenene.
ሰላም እንዴት ዋላችሁ?
By the way, for our viewers, Yanis is going to speak in Amharic, and then we have an interpreter, and we have an interpreter. So as we want to be inclusive, we want to make sure that people are heard and seen in their individuality. So back to you.
አመሰግናለሁ። እንዴት ዋላችሁ? በዚህ ዌብናር ላይ በመገኘቴ በካስማ በጎ አድራጎት ስም አመሰግናለሁ። ስሜ የኔነሽ ጥላሁን ይባላል። የካስማ በጎ አድራጎት ድርጅት መስራችና ዋና ስራ አስፈጻሚ ነኝ። እንዲሁም በኢትዮጵያ የተመላሽ ጥምረት ዳይሬክተር ነኝ።
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of myself and CASMA Charitable Organization
and
for your
please
presence.
Put you up with the interpretations, please. We can't
Excuse
hear
me?
you speaking.
Sorry? Shall I continue? Hello?
The interpretation is available on the
And Dale, please
original.
could you move to the English room, please? Click on the global icon and move to English.
Yeah, just I put it there. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
All right. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of myself and CASMA Charitable Organization. I will begin by introducing myself. My name is Janina Shtlahun, and I am Executive Director of CASMA Charitable Organization and Chairperson of Ethiopian Survivor-Led Organization Coalition. I'm honored to be with you to discuss something that is close to my heart and that is I know well. The vulnerabilities of human trafficking survivors in the Middle East, and to share the best practice for reporting and supporting them. የኔ ቀጥይ
እሺ አመሰግናለሁ። እንግዲህ በሁለት መንገድ ለማቅረብ እሞክራለሁ። አንደኛው በመካከለኛው ምስራቅ እንደኔ ያሉ ሴቶች የሚጎዳቸውን ተጋላጭነታቸውን በተመለከተ ነው። ሁለተኛው ደግሞ ሰርቫይቨሮች በመደገፍ ሂደት ላይ ያገኘነውን መልካም እድልና መልካም ተሞክሮ ለማካፈል እሞክራለሁኝ። Thank you. አቶ እንዳለ
My presentation has two parts. The first one is to identify the vulnerabilities that impact women similar to me in the Middle East. Second, I will bring up the good practice that we found in the process of supporting survivors, and then I will summarize my thoughts. የኔ ቀጥይ
እሺ በመጀመሪያ በመካከለኛው ምስራቅ የሚገኙ ሰርቫይቨሮች ተጋላጭነትን የህገ ወጥ የሰዎች ዝውውር፣ የጉልበት ብዝበዛ ትልቅ ችግር ነው። ይሄ በኢትዮጵያ ህገ ወጥ የሰዎች ዝውውር በተመለከተ ኢትዮጵያ በሶስት መንገድ እንግዲህ ትነሳለች። እንደ መተላለፊያ፣ እንደ ምንጭና እንደ መዳረሻ አገር ትታያለች።
Vulnerabilities of survivors in the Middle East, human trafficking and labor exploitation in the Middle East are significant problems. And Ethiopia is affected by this trafficking in three ways: as a transit route, as a source, and as a destination.
አመሰግናለሁ። እንግዲህ ለምሳሌ ከግንቦት 2017 እስከ ታህሳስ 2021 በመካከል 4,425 ተመላሾችን ከዚሁም ውስጥ 79,498ቱ በ2021 ከሳውዲ አረቢያ የተመለሱ ናቸው። ስለነዚህ የተመለሱ ሰርቫይቨሮችን ማቋቋም ከባድ ስራ ይጠበቅብናል። ለህገወጥ የሰዎች ዝውውርና የጉልበት ብዝበዛ ከሚያጋልጡት ዋና ዋና ምክንያቶች ውስጥ ይጠቀሳሉ።
The International Organization for Migration, IOM, and the Ethiopian Central Statistics Agency joint report in 2021 detailed that 839,000 Ethiopian migrants abroad in the past 5 years, which is in the report period of 2021, out of which 425,000 returnees between 2017 and December 2021, with which 79,498 from Saudi Arabia in 2021 alone. So a challenging job is awaiting us in restoring all these survivors.
አመሰግናለሁ። እንግዲህ ለእነዚህ ችግሮች በዋነኝነት የሚጠቀሱት ከዚህ በታች ያሉትን አነሳለሁ። አንደኛው የከፈላ ስርዓት ነው። የከፈላ ስርዓት እንግዲህ እንደሚታወቀው አሰሪዎች የሰራተኞችን ፓስፖርታቸውን በመያዝ ተገቢውን ክፍያ የማይከፍሉበት፣ ወደ ውጭ ወጥተው ለመብታቸው የማይሟገቱበት ወይም እነሱ በፈለጉበት ሰዓት ተነስተው ወደ ሀገራቸው የማይሄዱበት ለአሰሪው ረዥም ጊዜ የሚሰሩበት ሲስተም ነው እና ያ በራሱ በጣም አስቸጋሪ ስርዓት ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ።
Vulnerability points that are listed under my presentation. The first one is the kafala system. The kafala system is a system that serves as a trap for employers. It is a way employers control their employees. which involves taking their passport, preventing them from leaving, and exposing them for abuse and labor exploitation.
ሌላው እንግዲህ ማንሳት የምንችለው እንደገና የህገወጥ አዘዋዋሪዎችን ማታለል ነው። ህገወጥ የሰዎች አዘዋዋሪዎች እንግዲህ የተለያዩ ቃሎችን ይገባሉ፣ የተለያዩ ክፍያዎች እንደሚከፈሉ፣ እረፍት እንደሚኖሩ። በአንድ ወቅት እኔም የዛ ሰለባ ነበርኩኝ። እዛ ሲሄድና ደግሞ ሳይ ደግሞ ያ ነገር እንደሌለና እንዳልሆነ ተረድቻለሁ። ስለዚህ ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ከባዱ የህገወጥ የሰዎች አዘዋዋሪዎች የሚሰጡት ተስፋ በጣም ከባድ እና ይህ ለሰርቫይቨሮች ደግሞ እንዲጋለጡ ከሀገር ሀገር እንዲንቀሳቀሱ እና መብታቸው እንዳይጠበቅ የሚያደርግ ነገር ነው። ይህንንም ማንሳት እወዳለሁ።
Okay, the second point is tricks by recruiters or traffickers. Recruiters lie to us. They promised good pay and safe job. I was also promised a better job in life, but it wasn't true. Kasma charitable organization continue to hear this daily from various survivors. Women are tricked into leaving Ethiopia, resulting in their suffering. Continue.
ሌላው በመካከለኛው ምስራቅ እንደኔ ያሉ የቤት ሰራተኞች የህግ ጥሰት ሲደርስባቸው፣ የደሞዝ መከልከል ሲደርስባቸው፣ የአካላዊ ጉዳት ሲደርስባቸው የሚከላከልላቸው ወይም የሚያግዛቸው ህግ የለም፣ የጋራ ህግ የለም። ስለዚህ የህግ አለመኖርና ለምሳሌ በመካከል የጋራ መግባቢያ ሰነድ አለመኖር በራሱ እዚህ ላይ ትልቅ ተጽዕኖ አምጥቷል ብዬ አስባለሁኝ።
Third point is lack of protective laws. In the Middle East, domestic workers like me have no legal rights. Even if we are harmed or not paid, there is no one to advocate for us or laws to demand our rights. No one extends a helping hand. This can be substantiated with the absence of bilateral agreement between countries in relation to this migration process.
አመሰግናለሁ። ሌላው ደግሞ ተመልሰን ስንመለስ ወደ ሀገራችን ስንመጣ የሚደርስብን ሀፍረት እና የማህበረሰብ መገለል ነው። ወደ ሀገር ቤት ስንመለስ ከባድ ነው። ሰዎች ይረዱናል፣ ምን እንዳሳልፍን እንኳን አያውቁም። በከፋላ ስርዓት ምን ሲደርስብን እንደኖረ፣ ገንዘባችን ጉልበታችን እንደተበዘበዘ፣ ምን አይነት ችግር ውስጥ እንዳለፍን እንኳን ሊረዱን ፈቃደኛ አይደሉም። ስለዚህ ያ በራሱ ተመሳሳይ ስሜትን የሚጎዳ ነገር ነው። ዛሬም ድረስ ካስማ ውስጥ የምናገኛቸው ሴቶች የዛ ችግር ሰለባ ናቸው። በየቀኑ የምንሰማው የዕለት ተዕለት ሁኔታ ነው ያለው።
Okay, the fourth point is the shame upon return, or which can be called a social stigma. Returning home is difficult. People judge us. They don't understand what we have been through. We might return empty-handed under the kafala system. So we are ashamed to reintegrate into the community. It is hard to return and become independent again. Many women Kasma helps feel the same way today.
ሌላው ጦርነትና ትርምስ ነው። እንደ ሊቢያ፣ ሶሪያ፣ ሊብነን ባሉ ቦታዎች ውስጥ ጦርነቶች እንዳሉ ይታወቃል። በዚህ ሁኔታዎች ውስጥ ሰዎች ይሄዳሉ፣ የተለያዩ ስራዎችን ለመስራት ይገደዳሉ። ለምሳሌ እኔ በመጀመሪያ የስደት ጉዞዬ ሳደርግ በሶሪያ እና በሊብነን መካከል ነበርኩኝ። ስለዚህ ምን ያህል ጦርነት አስከፊና አስቸጋሪ እንደሆነ በደንብ እረዳለሁኝ። ከዛ ውስጥ ተርፎ ደግሞ መውጣት በጣም ከባድ የሚሆንበት ሁኔታዎችም አሉ። ስለዚህ የጦርነትና የትርምስም ሰለባ የምንሆንበት ሁኔታ አለ።
Okay, the fifth point is wars and chaos. War in the Middle East, like Lebanon, Syria, and Libya, exacerbates the situation. This situation exposes women to serve labor exploitation or push them into bad jobs. When I first worked in the Middle East, I was near the Lebanon-Syrian border, and I realized how dangerous and scary it was.
ሌላው እንግዲህ ላነሳ የምወደው የድንበሮች ክፍት መሆንና የኮንትሮባንድ መመላለሻዎች ክፍት መሆን ነው። በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ እንደ ሶማሊያ፣ ሱዳን ድንበሮችን ለምሳሌ ማንሳት እንችላለን። እኔ ለመጨረሻ ጊዜ እንግዲህ ወደ ሀገር ቤት የገባሁት በሱዳን አድርጌ በመተማ በኩል በእግሬ ነው። እኔ ስገባ ሌሎች የሚወጡ ሰዎች ነበሩ፣ ወደ ሚድል ኢስት የሚሄዱ ስደተኞች፣ ፓስፖርት የሌላቸው ምንም የሌላቸው። ስለዚህ በራሱ የእሱ ክፍተትና እዛ ጋር ቁጥጥር አለመኖሩ እንደገና መስመሮች ክፍት መሆናቸው ሰዎችን ሰለባ ያደርጋል።
The other point is porous borders and smuggling routes. Ethiopia's borders are very open, especially with Sudan and Somalia. Smugglers or dalalas easily move people across these lines. When I walk back through Matama from Sudan to Ethiopia, I saw how easy it was for traffickers to take women to the Middle East. These roads make us an easy target.
ሌላው እንግዲህ የምናነሳው የግንዛቤና የትምህርት ጥራት እጥረት ነው። ብዙዎች አደጋዎችን እናውቃለን። በኢትዮጵያ በምስራቅ አፍሪካ ትምህርት በተለይም በገጠራማ አካባቢ ዝቅተኛ ነው። እንግዲህ እኔ ወደ አዲስ አበባ አካባቢ ነው ያደግኩት። ነገር ግን ችግሩን ሰለባ እንደሆነ ያደረገኝ በነገሩ ላይ ግንዛቤ አልነበረኝም ነበረ። ስለዚህ በውሸት የሚደረጉ ማታለያዎችን ለመከላከል አልቻልኩም። ስለዚህ የግንዛቤና የትምህርት እጥረት እንዳለ ይሰማኛል።
The other point is lack of awareness and education. Many of us don't know the risk. In Ethiopia and East Africa, education is low, especially in rural areas. Though I grew up in Addis Ababa, but I didn't fully understand the danger of migration until I became the victim. Without awareness, we are exposed to the lies of traffickers, and we believe what they say and leave us unprepared. The last point, Yaninash?
ሌላው እንግዲህ የቤተሰብና የማህበረሰብ ጫና ነው። እንግዲህ እኔ በምኖርበት በምስራቅ አፍሪካ አካባቢ ወይም በኢትዮጵያ አካባቢ ሴት ልጅ ለቤተሰቦቿ ለማህበረሰቦቿ ማገልገል እንዳለባት ይታሰባል። ገንዘብ ከሷ ይጠበቃል። እኔ ለምሳሌ ለልጆች የትምህርት ቤት ክፍያ ለመክፈል ነበር ከሀገር የወጣሁት፣ ደጋግሜም የተሰደድኩት። ይህ ከማህበረሰቡ የሚመጣ ጫና እንግዲህ አደገኛ እንደሆነ ይታወቃል። እንኳን ወደ አደጋ ለመግባት እንገደዳለን። ቤተሰብ መርዳት አለብን፣ ልጆች ማሳደግ አለብን። ስለዚህ ማህበረሰቡ ከኛ ይሄንን እንደ ግዴታ አድርጎ የሚወስድበት ሁኔታ አለ።
Okay, the last point is our families and community pressure that makes us vulnerable. Our family problems push us to seek a life of migration. In Ethiopia, if you are a daughter or a mother, you are expected to send money home. I had to pay my children's school fee, so I migrated for the second time. This pressure from families and community forces us into danger, even when we know it's risky. In general, war and poverty in Ethiopia and East Africa aggravate our vulnerabilities. Such ongoing wars and instability push people to migrate and be exposed to labor exploitation. Economic problems and unemployment are also notable reasons in this region. I migrated before because I had no work and had to pay my children's school. These things, war, poverty, lack of jobs, and factor that push vulnerable women like me into danger. Yani?
ሌላው እንግዲህ ሰርቫይቨሮችን ለመደገፍ ምርጥ የምንላቸውን ልምዶች ነው ማንሳት የምፈልገው። አሁን ሰርቫይቨሮች እንዴትና እንደሚድኑና እንዴት እንደሚረዱ ጥሩ ልምዶች የሚለዋቸውን አንድ ከታች ያሉትን ነጥቦች ለማንሳት እወዳለሁ። ልቀጥል?
ኦኬ ኮንቲኒው።
እሺ እንግዲህ የህይወት ክህሎት ስልጠና ነው የመጀመሪያው፣ ወይም አዲስ ህይወትን እንዲለማመዱ ማድረግ ነው። አዲስ ችሎታ ወይም አዲስ ክህሎት እንዲኖራቸው ከመሄዳቸው በፊት እንግዲህ ብዙዎቹ ከትምህርት ላይ ተነስተው ከአካባቢያቸው ተነስተው ስለሚሄዱ ብዙም ሙያ ተኮር ስልጠና የላቸውም። ስለዚህ እኛ እንግዲህ ካስማ በጎ አድራጎት ድርጅት ከ1500 በላይ ሴቶችን ለማሰልጠን ሞክረናል፣ ባለሙያ ለማድረግ። ዛሬ ላይ ሰርቫይቨር መር ድርጅቶች ተመሳሳይ ነገር እያደረጉ ይገኛሉ። ምክንያቱም ስልጠና ወደ ስደት ተመልሰው እንዳይሄዱ የሚያደርግ አንድ መሳሪያ ነው ብለን እናስባለን።
Okay. The best practice that CASMA has been applying is the following. The first one is training for a new life. New skills or abilities give us a hope, the hope that we can work and support ourselves. CASMA has trained and continue to train over 1,500 women in hairdressing, tailoring, and other skills, making them professionals. Today, we help other survivor-led organizations to do the same. This is because training protecting us from returning to the danger of migration again. Yani kate?
Sorry, you're muted.
You are muted, Nash? አይሰማ
ይቅርታ። እሺ የስነ ልቦና ምክርና የስነ ልቦና ድጋፍን እንሰጣለን። ምንጊዜም ቢሆን የስደት ትዝታ ከኛ ጋር የሚቀር ነገር ነው። ይህ እንግዲህ ከግንኙነታችን ውስጥ አንዱ ካስማ በጎ አድራጎት ድርጅቶች የሚያደርገው ከሌሎች ተመላሾች ጋር የመመካከር እና ችግራችንን በጋራ የመፍታት ታሪኮቻችንን የማውራት ልምድ አለን። ይህ የባለሙያ እና እርስ በርስ የምክክር ነገሮቻችን እኛን በደንብ ረድቶናል። አእምሯችን ላይ የነበረውን የስነ ልቦና ጫና ቀንሶታል። ስለዚህ ይህንን እንደ ጥሩ ተሞክሮ እንወስደዋለን ማለት ነው።
The second best practice that we considering is counseling. The memories of migration always stays with us. With this in mind, CASMA has a program where counselors and returnees from migration talk and advise each other. Also, returnees share their common stories within the organization. This professional and peer-to-peer counseling has helped many of us. Every survivor needs this. Someone has to listen and talk to, which allows us to get a peace of mind.
ሌላው እንግዲህ ድጋፍ የስራ ማስጀመሪያ ገንዘቦችን ማፈላለግ ነው። ትንሽ ድጋፎች ነገሮችን ሲለውጡ አይተናል። ከአስማ ሰርቫይቨሮች አደራጅቶ በሰለጠኑበት ዘርፍ ወደ ስራ ማሰማራት፣ ለምሳሌ ልብስ ስፌት፣ ማሽን መግዛት፣ የውበት ሳሎኖችን ገቢ እንዲጨምር ማድረግ፣ ሆቴል ቱሪዝም ላይ ገብተው በደንብ እንዲሰሩ ማድረግ፣ ይህ በራሱ ትልቅ ነገር ነው ብለን እናስባለን። ሌላው እንግዲህ ደህንነታቸው ተጠብቆ እንዲሁም እንደገና አደገኛ ወደ ሆነው ስደት እንዳይመለሱ የሚያደርግ ምርጥ ተሞክሮ ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ።
The other best experience that we have is support. Just to start a new business, we believe that small grants make a difference. CASMA organizes survivors and deploys them to work in a field that they trained in by purchasing sewing machine, expanding the income of the beauty salon that they have, enabling them to earn better incomes. This helps ensure their safety and prevent them from returning to dangerous migration route again.
ሌላው እንግዲህ አራተኛው ሰርቫይቨሮች እንዲናገሩ ችግራቸውን እንዲያስረዱ መፍቀድ ነው። ካስማም የተመሰረተበት ዓላማ ለምንና እንዴት የሚለውን ምክንያት ከራሳቸው ከተጎጂዎች አንደበት ማስረዳት እንዲቻል ነው። ፖሊሲዎች እንዲለወጡ፣ አዋጆች እንዲሻሻሉ፣ ህጎች ተግባራዊ እንዲሆኑ ማድረግ ነው።
The other best experience that we have is allowing survivors to speak and leading the struggle. We explain the reasons why and how CASMA is formed or established, to raise awareness, to fight for better policy, and to ensure that those enacted policies are implemented. ያኔ
ሌላው እንግዲህ በሀገሮች መካከል አብሮ መስራትና አገሮች እርስ በርሳቸው ጠንካራ የሆነ ሕግ እንዲያወጡ በመካከለኛው ምስራቅ ኔትወርክ መፍጠርና አብሮ መስራት ነው።
The other point is working together across countries. Countries must help each other. Ethiopia and the Middle East countries must enact stronger laws and work in collaboration spirit.
ሌላው እንግዲህ ሰርቫይቨሮች ጥምረት እንዲኖራቸውና በመተባበር እዚህ ዘርፍ ላይ መስራት አለባቸው ብለን እናስባለን። ለዛም ደግሞ የሰርቫይቨር ጥምረትን መስርተናል። እዛ ጥምረት ላይ እንግዲህ በ2024 እንደ አውሮፓውያን አቆጣጠር ከ5 የሚበልጡ ሰርቫይቨር ድርጅቶች ጋር ሆነን በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የተለያዩ ጥምረቶችን መስርተናል። እንግዲህ በዚህ ጥምረት ላይ አብሮ መስራትን ለችግሩ አብሮ መታገልን በምስራቅ አፍሪካ እንዲሁም አፍሪካ ህጎች ላይ ጥምረት መስርተናል። በአንድ ሀሳቦችን መለዋወጥ ብዙ ሴቶችን እናጠናክራለን፣ ልምድ ይኖረናል፣ ከሌሎች ጋር ብዙ ትምህርት እንማራለን ብለን እናስባለን እና በጥምረቶች መሰባሰባችን ራሱ አንድ ጥሩ ተሞክሮ ነው ብዬ አስባለሁኝ።
The other point is building coalition of survivors. To achieve our mission, we have formed a coalition of locally established survivor-led organization. Building on this, in December 2014, we established the Ethiopian Survivor-Led Organization Coalition. CASMA doesn't work alone now on, but together with members of the coalition to support survivors. This coalition has expanded, and we have started regional coalition in East Africa and one for the Africa as a whole. Together, we exchange ideas, train more women, and strive to bring about a significant change. This makes our voice louder and stronger.
ሌላው እንግዲህ በሰርቫይቨሮች የሚመሩ ድርጅቶች ፈንድም ሆነ ድጋፍ ለማግኘት በጣም ይቸገራሉ። ስለዚህ ራሳቸውን የሚችሉበትና ራሳቸውን የሚያገዙበትን ነገር በደንብ አድርገን መስራት ያስፈልጋል። ለዛም ደግሞ ካስማ እንግዲህ ከበጎ አድራጎት ስራ ጎን ለጎን የራሱን ካፌ ከፍቶ ለድርጅቱ ገቢ ማስገኘት ጀምሯል። ያ በራሱ ትልቅ ተሞክሮ ነው ብዬ አስባለሁ።
Okay. CASMA empowers survivors to become financially independent by helping them establish and manage small businesses like cafeteria. We recently opened a new business in cafeteria as this serves as a model example for others. Those points that we read in the above points, the practice works because they have helped me and 1,500 others like us. I have transitioned from a hopeless returnee to leading the CASMA organization to achieve our goals. However, we need more resources, more money, and better laws because there are still many. We need to help those who are suffering. CASMA and our coalition have created the Ethiopian Coalition Survivor to voice our efforts together and help us.
Thank you, Kashma, and we appreciate your comprehensive input. Mindful of time, I think a lot of people are saying bye because we had committed to 90 minutes. We apologize for kind of chipping in the 30 minutes. However, as you know, that survivor-led organizations are coming up and they have a lot of wisdom and a lot of best practices that we wanted to share.